it was impressive how eager the students were to share out about multiplication and division. What was going on in my head is this sort of stuck notion with the twos, and not really, was hard to get them to expand even when I said, could that work with a different number? And there were a lot of like, no, the idea of equal groups didn't come up naturally, and so I tried to put it out there a little bit, and then gave a little heavier hand so that would come up throughout the lesson, to bring in this idea of, they are equal groups. Maybe that's important. Two things, something that I noticed that happened in both lessons was they both brought up, the first thing they said about it, multiplication, was it's like addition. And the first thing they brought up about division is that it's like subtraction. And that to me was very much something that they were told, they couldn't back up at all. And the more I thought about it, I almost said out loud, it's hard to explain how division is subtraction, because we don't tend to subtract iteratively like that. We don't use repeated subtraction. It's not a strategy I find very useful, but for whatever reason, our kids, both groups of kids, and maybe we condition them to know, this is sort of like subtraction. So another to investigate is, is that useful information for them? They liked to show that connection of multiplication and division. Because I was looking for the idea of groups when they couldn't explain the division in equal groups, I did choose to extend that warm up longer, that sort of opening longer, to try and push them into this idea of groups and let them explore, which I thought was pretty cool how they came up with all the different types of groups, equal groups. Still, I felt like I was putting on them that, they're equal. When they were doing their drawings, that felt really good to me, that they were engaged and they were all thinking, and it was compared to that first lesson, I thought, oh my gosh, engagement, versus that stark, like, I was just told what to do and I don't know what it is. Because they weren't given explicit instructions except draw something, they were thinking about it. They wanted to start with numbers, and I just said, okay, put down your numbers first and then go ahead and make a drawing that fits with that. I liked that it came up that there was no question, but they were already starting to think of answers to questions. This is my answer, it's 8 times 3, or this is my answer, it's 8. Wayne would have $8. And then then I had to make a decision about where to go with how to share all those out, because they were so different, and some of the kids did have the misconception of 24 times 3. So ultimately, for time and other things, I decided, let's get this model up here. They've looked at some other models. Let's just see how they react to this particular model, because that was our goal. And in doing that, the big aha for me was, and I just looked at the papers, approximately half of them used it incorrectly and wrote 24 3 times, to find out that Wayne had $72, 3 times as much.
Well, I was working with one of the students, put 8 in there, came up with the answer of 8, but the other 4 at the table had 24, and so he switched it, and I asked him why he switched it, and he couldn't explain it to me. So I asked him, was it because the others had 24? And there was this dead silence. So I said, maybe you should trust your own thinking. But sometimes peer pressure has to do with it. And so the same question would be, it seemed like the other half of the classroom had it correct, and I wondered how many of the children understood it and how many had copied the correct answer.
Most of the people I observed had the 24, 24, 24. And so then Wayne also had 24. And they did like cookies, they did little squares, they did 3 Marias with lots of hair, even though you told them not to do that, and a little Wayne picture. But somebody called Jarrell made 3 rows of 8 dots and then circled them and had it just like a textbook solution. 24 divided by 3 is 8. Wayne is $8. Maria is $24. And then another little girl did 8 threes, and so we know that it's, she did have the right answer that Wayne had $8, but it's really hard if Maria is 3 times as much as Wayne and you use the model this way instead of 3 groups of 8. How do you ever figure out what Wayne got? So it was just sort of a troubling picture because it doesn't show that mathematical relationship. It shows you just kind of a number sentence that equals 24.
I asked her what, I don't remember the exact questions I asked her, but what does this tell you? And I said, I think I may have said, I noticed you said that Wayne has $8. How does your picture tell you that? And she said, well, there are 8 boxes. And so I agree with what you're saying, that so she used the understanding the mathematics to try to draw a diagram, then to represent it. And so, but the 8 boxes doesn't make sense in the same way as having $8.
The other one.
Yeah.
And then one little guy had 24 circles with 3 dots in each circle. Which obviously isn't the relationship that you wanted, but he really got the idea of the pretend strategy. He goes, well, I could make it cookies, I could make it pizza, it doesn't matter what group I choose for making my picture because the math will be the same, which, that's a good mathematical concept that you can make it any friendly thing that you want to draw. So I kind of like that, but and then the final thing that I just want to say is there was one table that pretty much all had the 4 8s. And all 4 of them put 24 here too. And it wasn't until you then uncovered the question that one of the 3 changed their 24 to the 32. And all of them kind of wrote the sentence with the 32 in it, but only 1 out of the 4 went back to change the number in his model. So they weren't really understanding kind of what this box out here was.
One of the boys just was stuck in the 24 plus 24 plus 24, and he actually initially started as 24 times 3 and then got 62. And then got wrapped up in the whole multiplication of that, but he insisted that it was 62, and then he added different ways, tried to break numbers up, and so someone else in the group was like, no, it's 72, and let me show you why. So they were so wrapped up in that and solving just that multiplication problem that the rest just, they couldn't follow the rest of the lesson in that. But one of the girls in the group, she drew out the bars, and they were connected, but for Maria she had 24 in each box, and then for Wayne she had 8. When I asked her if she could explain how she knew Wayne had 8, she said, well, 8 times 3 is 24. And I said, well, what do the 8 and the 3 mean? And she couldn't explain it. So there was a lot of misunderstanding at that table group.
To not just teaching that process of multiplication, but really trying to get kids to make that connection to equal groups. Mm-hmm. And then that's so critical for them understanding what a unit is and to be able to do algebraic thinking.
Yeah.
So you really want, how do we get that connection when they first start making sense of multiplication, to really think about those equal groups so you don't have to, force it out of them, or I think I had to even introduce the word groups to get them to say anything at all. So
it's really important that they build their algebraic and mathematical vocabulary. They just don't have it, and it has to be repeated to them, and they have to repeat it to feel comfortable with it. And I think that was a major part of what happened with reading the story problems, not cueing onto the wrong cues, and understanding the vocabulary and being able to use it.